Good morning, everybody. Thank you once again. Very welcome to everyone who's taking time to join the presentation. I am Dion Libbe, the Solution Sales Manager for Research Intelligence in Africa, and I'll be moderating this meeting. As you may have noted from the invitation, this webinar will provide some insight into the mapping of research output and impact to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, some steps on how to analyze the performance of institutions and research groups related to Sustainable Development Goals using SciVal, as well as benchmarking with peer institutions and identifying potential partners to collaborate with on the Sustainable Development Goal related projects. And finally, an overview will be presented on how SciVal Sustainable Development Goal indicators relate to the Times Higher Education Impact Ratings. Just some housekeeping. The session is being recorded. All attendees will automatically receive a link to the video. All participants have automatically been muted, but you're welcome to ask questions. Kindly submit the questions using the Q&A feature that you see on top of the screen. At the end of the presentation, we'll answer some of the questions as time permits. For the questions that we do not manage to answer today, we'll respond via email in the next few weeks. So please include your name with your question so that we are able to contact you. Our presenters for the presentation is Chris James, the Senior Product Manager for SciVal, and Lucia Skumbi, the Senior Customer Consultant for Research Intelligence. James will be on first. James, can you share your screen from that side?
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everybody. So my name is Chris James. I'm one of the product managers that work on SciVal, based in Amsterdam, and I've been working very closely with our teams on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and I'd like to give a short introduction to the SDGs and to how we have actually created search strings which have then been used in products like SciVal. So hopefully you're aware of the SDGs. They're basically a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everybody. What they're looking to do is to address the global challenges that we face, and this includes things related to poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, and peace and justice. There are 17 goals in total, and they're all interconnected. And in order to make sure that we leave no one behind, the aim is to achieve them all by 2030. Yeah, so the SDGs, I've done a lot of customer visits in many different parts of the world, and all of the customers I speak to, they have realized the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals, the importance of working towards them. And they're obviously looking to try and find ways of demonstrating the impact, of showing the work they're doing in these areas. So this is obviously very prevalent when you look at the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, which I know Lucia will talk about later. So we do provide the data for that, and they are using the data which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. What we've done with this data is it then allows us to put it into products like SciVal, and this then allows you to look at each of the SDGs related to the search query we've created, and then to have a look at who's working towards the goals of each SDG, which institutions, which countries, who they're working with, and what the kind of impact of that is. And I know that Lucia will have a bit of a demo later, so you'll see that in more detail in a bit. So the themes and the search queries that I'm about to show you, they actually took a bit of time to develop. So we started back in 2017 with a sustainability report where we mapped, so we created this sustainability report in 2015, in fact, and we used this to look at the different SDGs that were launched back then, and we created keywords to actually relates to each of these SDGs. And back in 2017, we only mapped a few of these key phrases, and we actually mapped 6 of them, which were then used in December 2018 for the first Impact rankings in April of 2019. So we had 6 which we started with. Then in 2019, we were approached by THE. They wanted to include more in their rankings, which they used this year. And so we then had to go through and map out the additional 11, because we created 16 in total, not 17. So we had to map out the additional metrics. And I'm about to show you now how we did that. So next slide, please. Before I do that, it's important to understand everything we've done, we've been open and transparent about. So if you'd like to see the methodology, the search queries that were used by the THE for their rankings, those can be downloaded from this Mendeley link here. Okay, next slide. So what we started with is we started with an SDG, and I'm going to show you an example with SDG 1, which is no poverty. We started with the original search query, which was created for the THE rankings for last year. And then we went through a number of steps of improvement so that we could effectively reduce the number of papers that were linked to each of the SDGs and filter out the false positive results. So if you can go to the next slide, I'll show you what happened. So this is SDG 1, so ending all poverty or poverty in all forms. And the original search string which we have there, which you can see on the left-hand side, it has 210,000 document results when you look at a 5-year period. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see our new search string, which is significantly bigger, but actually as a result, it has much fewer documents. So this whittled it down to just over 10,000 documents for the whole world. And I'm going to show you the method that we went through in order to do that. So the first thing we did is we would look at, on the UN website, have a look at each of the goals which, as they were described by the UN. So here for no poverty, what they were talking here is really the eradication of extreme poverty, the appropriate social protection systems, the equal rights to economic resources, to ensure their access to basic services, tenure rights, ownership, etc. So we looked at the terms which were actually being used by the UN to define the goals of each of the SDGs, and we wanted to reflect those in the search strings that we now use in the products. So we looked at the initial search strings. And you can see below what we did is we took the initial search string and we looked at the top 20 cited articles and also at a random 20 cited articles. Then we went in and actually read the titles and abstracts and even went into the full text if necessary to see, is this article really working towards the goals of this SDG, or is it what we call a false positive? And here we can see that the red articles means that it did not actually work towards the goals. So here, for example, if I move across here, we're talking about plastic waste input from land into the ocean, which is not working towards no poverty exactly. So if you can go to the next slide, please. And this is also the same when we looked at a random 20 set of articles. So only 1 out of the 20, when you read them, was really actually working towards the SDG of no poverty. And an example here is inflation and welfare in the retail market is one of the articles which came up on the original search string. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So what we then did is we took the original search string and we modified it. So we did things, instead of using the word poverty, we changed that to extreme poverty, to poverty alleviation, to poverty reduction. We removed the words income and finance because they were too broad, and instead added things like financial aid and poverty, financial aid and poor, social protection and access. And you can see the other ones we used. And that gave the search string that you can see on the right-hand side. Then we went through and did the same check again. So with the new search string, when we look at the top 20 cited articles and a random set of 20 articles, are we getting more positive results, so results which are really working towards the goals? And here you can see the first one, for example, evidence-based intervention for improvement of maternal and child nutrition. What can be done and at what cost? and also financial crisis, austerity, and health in Europe. So really looking at the poverty side of things. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Some of these, so this is SDG 1. There are Word documents like this for the 16 SDGs that we've done this for. Some of them are 32 pages long because we went through a number of iterations. You know, the new version of the search string was not good enough, so we had to go through and further improve it, further get rid of those false positive results until we got to a good set of documents. And if you can go to the next slide. What this means is it reflects in all of the search queries, it looks something similar to this. So we put the original search query on the left-hand side, the new query on the right. You can see we put this into a VOS viewer, pulling out all of the key terms which are from each of the articles. So you can see what is the sort of core terms within those documents. You see here on the left, it's mainly human, male, controlled study, healthcare delivery, etc. Whereas on the right, it's really poverty alleviation, poverty, microfinancing, sustainable development, economics. So much more exact results, which are working towards those goals. And you can see also the numbers reflect that. So far more documents on the original query with only 2 articles out of 40, which are reflecting the themes. And on the right-hand side, you can see that 16 out of the 20 reflect the theme when you're looking at the top 20, and from a random 20, 18. So a much better set of results. Not precise, so can be better, but still way, way better than what was there before. And those are now the search queries that you can now see in SciVal. And I think, Lucia, this is where I will hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yes, I'm going to take over here because I want to give you some insight into how you can use the SDG information in SciVal. I'm actually going to share my own screen. So just give me a moment there to switch over. Right. So just a brief introduction, because I know not everybody that is on the line today has used SciVal before. So just a very quick introduction to give you some information about what SciVal is really. And it is basically an analytical tool that is based on Scopus information, which allows you to do research performance management, so the analyticals that you need to do to understand and to use strategically publication information in terms of research management. So SciVal is divided into different modules: overview module, the benchmarking, and the collaboration module, as you can see on the screen, as well as the trends module. And I will try to show you as much as possible of each of these modules and how they will support you also in working with the SDGs. So with that brief introduction about what SciVal is, I'm going to go into live because I want to show you a live demonstration of how you can use SciVal. So as you can see, we are on the free version page that has been created to provide everybody access to the SDG information that we have created. So you can see scival.com/SDG, and this is where you can get an overview of the search strings, the results of the search strings that have been created for each of the SDGs. So by clicking on each of these, we'll provide information about each of them. So just selecting one of them, I'm going to select gender equality, and you'll find right at the start giving some analysis there in terms of what is the number of publications. And this is a global view now, so giving an overview of the number of publications that have been identified as relating to SDG 5, which is gender equality. And then it gives an overview in a word cloud format in terms of what are the key phrases that have come up this SDG. And the SDG and the key phrases have been extracted using natural language processing, where the size of the key phrase here indicates the relevance. In other words, how often and where in the text the phrase is used, and the color there indicates then the decline or the growth of the specific key phrase. For example, you can see violence here as a very prominent key phrase that is linked to this SDG. Moving below, there's information about the topics in which the research publications have been grouped into. So these topics are based on citation links between publications. It's based on the theory that publications containing the same references are working on the same topic. So in this example here also, violence against women and children, you can see this is a very prominent topic. It contains 5,534 publications with a citation impact there of 13% higher than the world average. So that field-weighted citation impact is basically the ratio of citations relative to all the citations in Scopus. And it's an indicator of what the citation count means relative to all the citations received in the database. So it's normalized for variables such as a subject area, date of publication, and also the type of publications. So giving a good indication of within this SDG, what are the topics that researchers are working on. In terms of the prominence, it also provides indication. So having ranked all of the topics that have been identified, there's a prominence that has been attributed to that, and the prominence is based on a lot of recency. So how recent has the publications been cited after publications, how recent have they been viewed after publication, and also the quality of the journal in which it has been published. So those factors indicate to us that that the topic has a lot of momentum, and with momentum we call that, we basically call that it's a prominence level within the number of topics within that has been identified. So first then seeing which are the most important key phrases, then looking at what are the topics that are related to this SDG, and then moving down to the active institutions. So from a global perspective, these are the institutions that are contributing the highest volume of publications to this SDG. So in this case, then Harvard, Johns Hopkins University, etc. And also then an indication of which countries are really contributing a lot. But of course, we want to analyze this a little bit further, and then we can go now into, so this is in the free layer, and go into SciVal and show you some more detail, some more metrics and insights that you can find. So going into the analyze in more detail is going to open up the full SciVal version, and it is opening us for us in the trends module. So, right. So in the trends module, so firstly, in the trends module, you can see in the entities panel under research areas, this is where all the SDGs have been profiled and where you can select them. I'm just going to close this for a moment. So under the SDG 5 that we have selected to look at, further information here is provided in the summary overview. So the number of publications, the field-weighted citation ones, again indicated there's 19% more than the world average. The absolute number of documents that have been that have at least one international co-author, the number of views and the citations, and then further information here. You can click on So from these key phrases that have been identified, also to click on these key phrases and then find further information that you can see on for the specific concept. Who are the contributors in this specific concept, right? And then once again, all the information here about that was also in the free layer about who are the key institutions, the key countries, and the key authors that are contributing to this SDG. Right, so in the entities panel, this is where you would select. So I've pre-selected to show you, because I wanted to also show you how you can compare these in terms of understanding for each institution what is the contribution within that institution. But very easily, if you want to identify or select an SDG to work with using the entities panel under the entity of research areas, to click on research areas and just identify the SDG that you would want to work with. It could be SDG 4, or you could also, it would automatically appear, or you could also use a relevant terminology like education, and the relevant SDG will then appear there. So this is how you define, how you select an SDG that you would want to further analyze in the entities panel. Right. So I have a few of them here. But most of us, and this gives us very good information in terms of understanding what is the perspective of an SDG when you're looking at from a global perspective, and really understanding and seeing what are the key concepts that researchers are working on and which institutions. But most often it is interesting for us to understand what is the contribution of our own institutions, and for this, the institutions tab here will provide us access then to select the institution that you want to analyze further, right? So the various options here are given in terms of filtering. So so our audience today is from Africa. We can select Africa and then a specific country within Africa. So we'll select we can select Ghana in this instance. I see we have a large participation from Ghana this morning. So selecting the institution and then going to the University of Ghana and finding information there about the number of publications within this SDG. Again, the field-weighted citation impact, the international collaboration, and the metrics that you would expect here to see. But also further information then about the collaboration, the academic corporate collaboration, and the specific key phrases for the university that the university is focusing on. Also the top institutions here. So I'll go into this again further, but giving an overview here of all the institutions within the country. Changing the visualization here can also give you some further insight. So I'm looking at a chart view, for example. So this is the map just to show all the institutions. But then a chart view that will give you a selection of universities within Ghana and their contributions to the SDGs, and where you can also then change the specific indicator that you are looking at. So you can either change that to cited, the field-weighted citation impact. So not looking at the volume, but what is the quality in terms of citations the contributions to the specific SDG, right? So here selecting University of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and Cape Coast University, but being able to select any other university, right? So I'll go back to the table view. And what we would want to do now is to create a publication set for the specific institution that can be analyzed further. And for each of the SDGs, it would be necessary to do this, to first select the SDG, filter to the institution or go to the institutions tab, then select on the number of publications. There's an option to save this as a publication set. So I'm going to do this, even though there's an option then to provide a name. So you can allocate a title that is most relevant for you, and then you can create your publication set based on that. Also adding tabs. I'm not going to do that because I already have done that for a number of the SDGs, right? So to be able to analyze your own institute, the SDGs from your institution's perspective, there's this facility to select the publications and then create the publication set. So further analysis then would be done in going to the entities tab again, and then finding the publication sets. And as you can see, I've already created a number of publication sets for the different. These are all University of Ghana, and one for University of Nairobi, and one for Wits University to just show some variety. So having selected these, I'll go back to SDG 5, which is an interesting SDG for me. And once it has been created in a publication set, this information can be analyzed now from each of the modules, the overview module, the benchmarking, and the trends module. So I'm going to just give you a peek there into the overview module, what you would be able to see on this SDG. So a selection of metrics, the output of the metrics, so the count there, the number of authors contributing, the field-based citation impact, the citations per publications, what subject areas are being represented within this SDG. Going on to see some of the more excellence indicators, the percentage that are within the top 10% most cited, for example, the number of that are published in the top 10% most highly cited journals, the international collaboration, and then using the tabs above also to find in the specific topics that researchers are working on within this university, right? So violence, wife beating, you can see the number of publications then that have been produced within that topic, and then more information about what is the impact of the citations coming from that, keeping in mind that 1.0 is the world average, and the prominence percentile as well. So these being basically in the top 7% of research that is produced in this specific topic. So those are a lot more information about the topics of the specific institution, and also giving a very nice visualization of the most important topics that are being worked on. So clicking this one was the top one with the highest number of publications. So the size of the circle really giving an indication of the volume. And then being able to deep dive into more information and being able to analyze in more detail so that you can understand from a more global perspective also who's contributing to this research or to this SDG in order to be able to build partnerships, find collaborators, etc. So just moving along. Also in the overview, just going back to the overview module, I jumped now from overview into trends, automatically looking at more information about the topic. But I wanted to show also in the overview module too that you can find information about collaboration in this SDG. So collaboration, international collaboration, the number, and this is a dynamic feature where if you select it, you will see the actual publications behind that and who are collaborating on these papers. And also when there is strong collaboration, that also reflects in the impact of the publications. Under Publish, I'm not going to go through all of these tabs, but one that is also would be interesting to be able to see what is the publication trend over time for the institution on this specific SDG. So often universities also want to see what, how do the SDGs of all of the SDGs, how do they compare with each other in order to be able to understand what is the strength and the weaknesses within the university. So the benchmarking module really allows you to do that. Once you've created a publication set for each of the SDGs, where you can then select them in the entities panel, once you have created them, as I've indicated here. And as you select them, the data appears in a visualization on the right-hand side to indicate what is the publication numbers over time compared to each other. So there's an indication that SDG 2, for example, has a higher number of publications than SDG 5, etc. And changing the metrics can also give you insight, not only of the volume, but also of the impact. So I'm selecting in this chart, selecting field-weighted citation impact, right, which then gives you a completely different view. So we can see there that SDG 5 then has a higher, SDG 5 has a, which is also gender, the one that we've been working with as an example, had very high impact in 2017. But then each of these can be analyzed. If you open the different visualization, looking at the tab, can actually see what the values are of each of these SDGs. And this gives you an ability to identify the strengths and the weaknesses within the institution on these SDGs. And then going back to the trends module, we've all, yes?
Sorry, can I just interrupt you? Maybe it's on the same screen. Just see there's a question. If it's possible to see the extent of the SDGs addressed by a specific author. So can it be brought down to that?
Yes, I will be showing that. I can show that in the trends module. I can also, it's also visible in the overview module. Sorry, I might have missed that. That's a very important. So of course you want to see who are the top authors contributing to your SDGs. So in the overview module, there's a tab for authors, and by clicking on the author, you'll see a complete list of all the authors that are contributing to this SDG, right? And the number of publications. Right, so thank you for that question. I might have, jumped over that. So in benchmarking, just to finish off in benchmarking, so not, of course, not only your own SDGs can be compared, but it is also possible to select SDGs to understand what are the peers doing as well. So what are peer institutions doing in terms of SDGs? So also selecting them, for example, say also SDG 5, because University of Nairobi I've profiled. I have in a publication set here. I don't have another university, but let's say we select WITS as well, even though it's a different SDG. Changing the chart. Again, we can change the metric that we are looking at. So if we're looking at scholarly output, for example, and making that comparison in terms of different institutions. So comparing across, so this is Wits University, and this is University of Ghana, and this is University of Nairobi, right? Okay. So then I'll jump also to the trends module to show what can be, what insights are available. We've already looked at the trends module. So on the summary level here, giving the basic metrics in terms of the output and the impact of the publications. And we've already looked at all of these. I wanted to go also and look into specifically, yeah, I think it was here that I wanted to show, you know, who are the authors then that are working within these specific fields. Right. Okay. So I don't know, maybe before I move on, are there any other questions? Before, because from this,
at this stage, the only other question coming in is if we can identify how the research impacts or contributes to policy generation.
How the impacts contribute to policy generation?
Yes.
Yes, that would be, I think that would be, you know, this is the data. So really extracting from this data and being able to look at the actual publications that are coming from them, and from those really doing further analysis to see where there is contribution to the policies. Yes. So I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to add something there.
Sure. No, it's a good question. I know that there are some tools that offer data on policy citations. So has your research been cited by policy documents, which we currently don't have, but we are looking into ways of improving how we address societal impact within our tools, and policy citations is one of the areas that we're looking at. So not something that is strongly covered in SciVal at the moment, but it is something on our roadmap and we're looking into it.
Okay. Right. So from SciVal and the value here being able to understand which researchers are working in which SDGs, how can we build collaborations, how can we understand what our strengths and weaknesses are. So this is really good information also that can assist us in terms of the impact ranking. So I want to talk next about the impact rankings and being able to understand your own SDGs well will also help you to decide which SDGs to select when you submit information for the impact rankings. So I'll just move back to my slides again. Right. Right. So the impact rankings were published last year in 2019 for the first time. This is a very unique ranking, and it joins a range of other Times Higher Education rankings that are quite well known already. So the first was in 2019. The second edition of the rankings already included 766 universities from 85 countries. And looking at, so, you know, just putting this into perspective, Times Higher Education has quite a number of rankings, global rankings, World University rankings, the World Reputation rankings, Young University rankings. There are regional rankings. There are rankings that focus on teaching, and then there's the impact ranking, which is very unique. So the first thing, looking at what is the eligibility, because it also differs from the other rankings, and that is that it is universities can apply for ranking when they do have a teaching, undergraduate level teaching at the university, and the university has to be accredited by a statutory body within the country. All universities need to submit institutional data in order to be ranked, and the data submitted has to have some justifications. It's also good to know that no surveys are used within this ranking, and that the bibliometric data is coming from, all of the bibliometric data is coming from Elsevier. The methodology also looks a lot different than the other rankings. It is based on all 17 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that is then in 3 categories. So the ranking looks at research, it also looks at outreach, and it looks at stewardship within the universities. And universities can submit data on as many SDGs as they are able to. So that is why I mentioned when we look at Cybele, it allows you to identify those SDGs where you're performing well, which would be an obvious choice when submitting information for the impact ranking. SDG 17 is the only compulsory SDG that you need to also participate in. And then the final score is calculated by SDG 17, as well as then the top 3 scores of the remaining 16 SDGs. The weighting, each of them are weighted as well. So SDG 17 has a weighting of 22%, the other SDGs each 26%. And the score from each of the SDGs are scaled so that the highest score will always amount up to 100 within specific SDG. So it all amounts up to 100, like most of the rankings. So the data that's coming from Elsevier, which is also quite interesting because for each of the SDGs, because they differ so much, different indicators are provided for the different SDGs. So this just gives an overview of the indicators that were selected as an indication of the research contribution in terms of the different SDGs. So for instance, if we look at gender, like we've been using as an example, it takes into consideration the site score as well as the proportion of female authored publications, and so different for each of the SDGs. What a total methodology would look like for a particular SDG is that the research component, which counts for 27%, so each of them looking differently, so research indicators differing. So for instance, in SDG 1, no poverty, Research would take into consideration the field-weighted citation impact of papers related to poverty. It would also take into consideration numbers of publications related to poverty and the proportion of all the research papers co-authored with low-income countries. Other metrics then would be proportion of students receiving financial aid, and in universities, anti-poverty programs or community anti-poverty programs. So each of these 17 SDGs have a different methodology, but they all would look more or less like this. When you look at the final scores, this is a very nice visual representation of the final score. So two in examples here from Morocco. So these are the three top scoring SDGs, and then the mandatory SDG number 17, which altogether then make up the total count, right? So you can see for each of the universities are then ranked by the total score, but you can also look at the scores from the perspective of the SDG. So looking, if you go to each of the SDGs, you would see what is the university's ranking position within that specific SDG. And then just an overview of what each of these icons, basically, what they represent. So this is how you would interpret the final scores, which is published on the Times Higher Education Impact Ranking webpage. So what it looks like for Africa at the moment, so really a very few countries really represented now: Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, as well as Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. So each of those countries have fewer than 5 universities that have been ranked in the impact ranking, and then Egypt then being the exception there with already 23, I think 23 universities that have been ranked. So with that, I've come to the end of just an overview of what the ranking is about and how to interpret the methodology and the final scores. And then if there are any questions at this point, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll hand back then to Chris to talk about some of the resources that we have available within Elsevier to support SDG analyses.
Lucia, I think there's one question that is quite important. Is the person wants to know if it's only research papers published in Elsevier publications, or can Cybele track the research performance? Does it have the capability to intercollaborate with other research repository servers to analyze the SGD research performance ranking of different institutions?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a good question. It is based on Scopus data. So Scopus also incorporates Elsevier. Scopus indexes more than 24,000 journals, of which some of them are from Elsevier. So Elsevier publishes more than 2,000 journals. So it does definitely include Elsevier journals, but it is a lot wider than that. But it is limited to the publications that are in Scopus at this stage. Maybe Chris can also comment if it's necessary for further on that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So what you said is correct. Yeah. Obviously based on Scopus data, and so SciVal also uses Scopus data. It goes back to 1996. So that's around 53 million publications, which are covered in SciVal, and say from 5,000 publishers. And then the question about can it incorporate data from other repositories? The answer to that is no. But if that data is being fed into Scopus, then we will pick it up. So if that data which is in a repository is also published manuscripts which are picked up by Scopus from those 5,000 publishers, then we will also see it in SciVal.
Shall we go to the next category and then Chris for an overview of some of the resources? Are the resources available?
Yes, please. If you can move the slides. So this is a free website which we made available. So SciVal.com/SDG. This is what Lucia demonstrated, and it gives some top level metrics about each of the SDGs. And then if you click on the analyze more, it will link you through to where you can analyze that in the SciVal if you have access to that. So take you straight to that SDG. But Lucia has given a nice demonstration about that already. And there's a link at the bottom there, Lucia. Yep. So that's for, I don't know what that link's for actually. So you'll have to fill me in, I'm afraid.
Okay, so this is not active, so maybe I can just go to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, and then in what we've did, well, as I mentioned, we did publish all of our data for free on Mendeley. So the 16 SDGs as a Word document for each, which explains the original search query and how we came to the final search query. Plus there is a file which contains each of these search queries. So you can take it and place it into Scopus so you can analyze there in more detail. And also you can find other resources to do with the Sustainable Development Goals if you have a look at Mendeley data. Then there is a resource center. So the RELX SDG Resource Center, you see the URL there. So sdgresources.relex.com. And within that, it has resources for all of the SDGs. There's news information. So if you want to know about news related to the SDGs, events related to the SDGs. Also on there, we are trying to collect feedback to help improve the mapping that we do to these SDGs. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So what we're doing, and I recommend if you have expertise in one of these areas to go there. So if you go to this resource center, there's a URL, you see it at the bottom there, but if you click on any of the SDGs, there's a link which says match research to SDGs. That's the link in red on the left-hand side. And it will pull up a random selection of articles coming from the search query from SciVal, and it will show you those articles. You can then click into it, read the abstract, see more information about the article, and then it will ask you to say, does it map actually to this SDG of no poverty? If it does, which of the targets and indicators does it map to? Or maybe you can say, no, it does not map at all. So we're collecting this feedback. And the idea here is that we can use this feedback to improve the search queries and improve how we map publications to the SDGs using machine learning. So your feedback here will help us improve that. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So what we're doing is we're actually actively working with some university partners to improve the mapping that we have to these documents to the SDGs. So working with Southern Denmark University, the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, it's actually the Aurora group based within them, and the University of Auckland. So these universities actually co-presented with me back in November last year when we launched the SDGs on SciVal. And we are working together to improve the search queries and also to look at machine learning techniques that can be used to find papers that search queries may miss out. And the idea here is to basically have an appropriate representation of publications which are moving the needle for each SDG. So again, are they really working towards those SDGs? Yes or no?
Sorry.
That's all right. You're just making me a bit seasick. The findings, once we have them, the findings will be open and available to everybody. So exactly like we've done with our previous SDG search queries, we will put them online. We're also looking to publish a paper in an open access journal so everyone can use that. So the idea here is that what we find, we will share, and then you can use this We'll put these into our tools and resources. Other people can put them into their tools and resources. And if they're a good improvement, which we're hoping they will be, these will also feature, we're hoping, in the next Times Higher Education impact rankings, so in 2021. So you'll see more about this through the rest of this year. But just to say that what we have in SciVal at the moment, what the search queries which we're using in Scopus, they are the beginning. We realize they're not perfect. We realize that there may be missing papers, and there could be papers included which do not exactly map. So we are improving them, and this is how we're going to do it. So I think that was all I had. I did see that there were some other questions that had come up, which maybe we should cover. If I may, there was a question that came up, and it went on to the researcher side again. So it was asking about how can a specific researcher see how they are working towards these SDGs. In our current tools, this is a little bit difficult to do because it does involve you having to kind of filter down to that researcher. So you can't take a researcher and then see if their papers match to an SDG. You have to do it the other way around. You have to start with the SDG first, and then filter down onto the country, and then see if the researcher name appears within that country. So you have to sort of filter down the SDG to get to the documents within it that belong to the researcher. And if the researcher has only published maybe one paper or two papers, maybe they don't feature in the top 500 researchers, so they fall outside of what is displayed in our products. We are looking at ways to improve that. So you would be able to look at an institution or look at a person and see have they got papers that are linked to that, to an SDG or SDGs, but that currently is not possible. So you have to start with the big SDG, narrow it down, filter it down until you get to the papers that give you the information you want. So the papers about that researcher or the papers about that institution. And also, if I may as well, there was a question at the beginning about DORA and the Leiden Manifesto. So it said, can you share how our products basically help with the measurement of impact and with the DORA and the Leiden Manifesto taken into consideration? For those of you who are not aware of what this means, basically a few years ago, I think it's actually 5 years ago, so around the same time that the SDGs were launched, the Leiden Manifesto, so Leiden's actually in the Netherlands, which is where I live. They, a group of bibliometric experts, scientometric experts, were basically looking at how research metrics are being used and abused. And they wanted to put down some simple rules that people use when they are looking at research metrics, so that this abuse of metrics is less likely to happen, should I say. So they had 10, so the Leiden Manifesto had 10 rules, DORA also had a number of rules, and there were other ones that were set out, but all of them had the same kind of goal. Basically what they're saying is that you shouldn't use metrics alone, you should use it with expert opinion. So if something doesn't look right with a metric, it probably isn't right. You should also use your common sense in this. You should never use just one metric, you should always use multiple metrics. Also things like whoever's being evaluated should have access to the data. The metrics should be open and transparent so people can see how things are calculated, and use the correct metrics in the correct situations. Don't compare subjects across each other because they have, with like normal citation metrics, because they have different citation patterns. Make sure you use normalized metrics to take those citation patterns into consideration. And make sure that if you're assessing people and they have different research life cycles, so they, a researcher for 5 years versus a researcher who's been publishing for 15 years, make sure you compare like for like, otherwise that's unfair. So those are the kind of principles that were out there. In our products, we do work with those principles. So you will basically never see a single metric on its own unless you do it yourself in benchmarking. So everywhere else, there are multiple metrics. We have guidance about metrics within the product. So we give guidance on so you can learn about those metrics. And we have a massive selection of metrics that you can use for different situations. We have normalized metrics, and we also give advice about using multiple metrics. And our customer consultants and people who go out and visit you, like Lucia and Dion, they also push the message of using multiple metrics, using peer review, etc. So far as these principles are concerned, yes, we do adhere to them. Yes, we do support them. And we are putting more and more of those tools and resources into our products as well. Okay, that's my metrics high horse. I'll jump off it and let Lucia say something.
No, that was an excellent overview of the, yes, I can just maybe say, additionally, DORA specifically focuses on not advising not to use any journal metrics, journal impact factor, or any journal metrics for that matter, to articulate the importance or the reputation of a researcher. So definitely we do also subscribe to that, not to do that, but to use metrics alongside each other, and to use the journal impact or the journal metrics in terms of evaluating journals and not of evaluating researchers. That's definitely something that we support.
Questions coming in at this stage. There was a person who wanted to know, is there attendance certificate for this training? And there is some questions on the recordings. Where can they get it? So just a reminder that the link to the recording will be sent to everyone who is registered and signed in. So that will be in the mailboxes. And then there's just a couple of questions linking to access at different institutions to SciVal. They say they cannot access the institution or access SciVal at the institutions.
Right. So firstly, let me just answer in terms of the certificate. We do issue some certificates for some of the webinars that we have been presenting, but we are not doing this for this specific webinar. It has actually become a bit of a problem for us to issue certificates, even though we do like to do that when it has a training kind of a perspective, but unfortunately it is being abused, so we're trying to look at a different system to handle that. So the short answer is no, we're not giving certificates for this specific webinar. For those institutions that SciVal has a institutional subscription. For institutions that are not subscribing to SciVal, we have provided some basic high-level information about the SDGs, as you saw, that are free of charge. If you would be interested to know more about SciVal, you can reach out to ourselves, and we can take that discussion further.
Thank you, Lucia. I don't see any further questions. I think we've addressed most of it. So thank you, everybody, for dialing in, for taking the time. Feel free to contact us, to visit the Elsevier website if you have any further questions. There is some contact persons on there. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lucia.
You're welcome.
And have a great day, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.